Hello, I am Georgina Rose and welcome back to the Dr. Arling YouTube channel. On this channel, we discuss everything related to magic, mysticism, religion, and everything on the fringes of esoterica. I am Georgina Rose, I'm a perennialist, polytheist, and thelemite, and I am a part-time esoteric content creator and part-time surfer of the Enochian Aethers. And welcome back to the Occult 101 series. This is the flagship series of this channel that I've been doing for over 4 years, where we talk about broad occult topics and give beginner introduction to them so that we can hear this video and then jump into further research. And in this video, I'm going to be talking about a popular yet misunderstood school of esoteric practice, and that is Hekatean Magick. So just using your obvious reasoning skills, you can understand Hekatean Magick is the magic of Hekate. So Hekate or Hekate, you hear it pronounced different ways depending on who's speaking and how devoted to classical languages they are, is a goddess from the Greek and Roman religion respectively. You will see it's both a C in the Greek religion and K in the Roman religion. And she really is a special goddess because she is not an Olympian, she is a Titan. She is a primordial goddess, a powerful goddess, one that has existed since the beginning of time, who is intensely powerful. And she's gained a lot of modern popularity because of her association with witchcraft. She often is called a witchcraft goddess, and for this reason, people who are interested in Wicca and witchcraft traditions tend to really like Hekate. And this is true. She is a witchcraft goddess, but she is much more than that. And I think it does a disservice to her mysteries to reduce her down to one singular title, especially when that title or that epithet was not actually her most popular epithet in antiquity when she was worshipped very popularly. She is really a goddess of a lot of things. And the way that I like to understand Hekate is to understand her as a goddess of the outsider, of the fringe, of the primordial, of the edge of society. She's on the precipice. She's a gatekeeper. And there's a lot of magical mysteries that relate to her themes. So the first mysteries I would say that people associate with Hekate are her lunar mysteries. So Hekate is very much a moon goddess. If you're familiar with the idea of the mother, maiden, and crone, Hekate is often sort of termed as the goddess of the crone. And she plays an important role in the monthly lunar cycle. So throughout every month, the moon goes through a life, death, and rebirth of its own. It goes from new, it waxes, it becomes full, it wanes, and then it becomes new again. It goes through a whole cycle, much like our life cycle. After all, there is no separation through all things, and so life, death, and rebirth goes along with the moon. And Hekate is sacred to the new moon phase, specifically the dark moon phase. So there's actually two parts to the new moon. There is when the sky is completely black, and then there is when the moon sort of comes back for the first time. And that represents rebirth, death, and coming back. And Hekate is very much associated with both of these things, but I would say more so with that dark moon phase, with death. Hekate is tied to death. She is tied to being a crone, to old age, and that is something that makes a lot of people flinch for a lot of reasons. In our modern culture, aging is viewed as really, really bad. And of course, we fear death. Death is the unknown. And Hekate very much is the unknown. Hekate is the thing we fear about death. She is the outside. She is the barrier. She is that gateway. She is the holder of the keys. And so she is that unknown thing. And so if you do approach Hekate, you can actually heal your relationship with death. The fear of death is one of the greatest anxieties that plague our minds. And through working with Hekate, this fear can be remedied. As well, Hekate is known as a psychopomp, or a spirit that can go between different realms. Hekate can go from all sorts of realms back and forth, and so by working with Hekate, you can sort of go through this journey as well. So that means that Hekate is really, really powerful for working with the dead, specifically for ancestor work or gaining insight from dead historical figures and your direct ancestors. If you want to do ancestor work, Hekate is a great pathway in because she is able to sort of, pull us across this gap back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So for ancestor work, super, super powerful. As well, Hekate is kind of chthonic, which means she is darker, which of course, light and dark, it's not as literal, it's not as good evil as people think, yin yang is true, right? There's light and darkness, but Hekate very much is on that darker side of things. She is the darker mysteries, she is chthonic, she is primordial. And so to understand things like the dark divine feminine, you can really approach Hekate for that, because so many people have this false idea that femininity is either like, a love goddess or a fertility goddess, when in reality there's a lot of other goddesses. And Hekate can teach us the other mysteries of femininity, the mysteries of the crone, the mysteries of a wisdom, right? Because Hekate, very much is a wisdom goddess. She's a goddess of gnosis, of knowledge. And so by approaching Hekate, you can gain so much insight that you might not know otherwise. As well, another aspect of working and honoring Hekate is her connection to plants. So Hekate is associated with poison plants. So poison plants are definitely something that comes up again and again and again within witchcraft, and Hekate is not, averse to this, right? There's an entire school of magic called Veneficium or Veneficia. It's a sort of subtype of, magia naturalis or plant magic where you work with poisonous plants. So poisonous plants are often entheogenic. They often take us into intense trance states, even hallucinatory states. And Hekate's garden, Hekate's plants are often these plants. As well, one thing we learn through working with poison plants is that blessing and bane grow on the same branch. These plants that, we associate with killing us, that's our sort of cultural ideas, like if it's poisonous, it just kills us, actually do have powerful and beneficial things within them. Actually, the scopolamine alkaloid that is within Datura, a very intense, witchcraft plant, actually is the basis of primitive anesthesia, which we definitely need if we ever need to go through surgery. As well, some of these alkaloids are used to stop extreme cardiac events. So what we've discovered with time is that these poisonous plants, often the plants sacred to Hekate, may seem poisonous, and they are poisonous if you take enough of them. But if you extract out of them, and if you purify them, and if you take just the right dose, they actually can be beneficial. Now, this is not me encouraging you to go and eat some poison berries. Don't do that. Don't do Veneficium unless you have a high knowledge of plants, but I do want to include that as part of Hekate's mystery. And one of the things I mentioned that these, poisonous plants can be entheogenic. Specifically, there is a possibility that you can have hallucinations and visions and leave your body. One of the big visions that people have repeatedly had from these poison witchcraft plants is them exiting their body, right? Astral projection. So that goes with Hekate's psychopomp themes. Remember I said that Hekate can travel from the higher realms to the lower realms back and forth. She's able to sort of move around. And when we exit our body, which is of course the ultimate act of transgression, we are able to do that same thing. We become psychopompic by engaging with the plants of Hekate. And in general, even if you're not interested in poison plants, which a lot of people aren't, the idea of learning remote viewing, learning astral projection, learning vision work, learning trance work, all of that can be done through working with Hekate. In a sense, a lot of the Hekatean mysteries are actually kind of shamanic. I read a really interesting book that I got at a bookshop in Wales, kind of arguing that witchcraft is a shamanic practice inherently, and I found that a really interesting take. It's one that I know a lot of people won't agree with, but I do think with Hekate in particular, you do see that resonance happening. You see that situation coming through where Hekate can help you have these shamanic type experiences where you're having visions, you're leaving your body, you're having these really intense experiences. In general, I would say Hekate is intense. Interestingly, she is so popular that she's now called like a beginner goddess, but in reality, her experiences are so intense. I honestly wouldn't, this term beginner goddess, I don't like it. I don't think any god or goddess is a beginner goddess. I mean, you can approach any god or goddess you want, but I would say if you're going to pretend this idea exists, I wouldn't call Hekate a beginner goddess because a lot of her mysteries, are quite advanced actually. So another thing that sort of comes up when we are working with Hekate is her sort of symbolism. One symbol that's used a lot with Hekate is this labyrinth symbol, this Hekate sort of wheel where it's this sort of maze. That is a big symbol of Hekate, and that really is a good way to connect with her. As well, the key, that is of course a really, really big symbol of Hekate. She's called the keeper of the keys. Now, another symbol that comes up a lot with Hekate is dogs. So in modern culture, we think of dogs as our best friend. We think of them as the ones we pet and take on walks. But, in the ancient world, when dogs were sort of a bit less domesticated than they were now, I mean, they were still domesticated, but not as much, dogs were seen as kind of scary, right? They could be wild, they could be feral, they could be intense, they could eat you, and dogs today still can eat you if they get mad enough or get rabies or something. And so Hekate is associated with the dog, but not the golden retriever. Hekate is associated with black dogs, the feral dogs, right? There is a ferality to Hekate that I think is really interesting and worth exploring, because when we think about our lives, we're very much, contained, right? We exist within a sort of domestic lifestyle of our own, right? We wake up, we go to work, we go to the gym. We don't ever explore the feral nature of humanity, right? That raw, that primal side of ourselves. And Hekate sort of asks us to release it. A lot of Hekate rituals, if you look at the ones, especially the more ancient ones, really include a lot of screaming. blood, even like bloodletting, a stasis. Hekate is not a goddess of softness and stillness. She is feral. She is the side of the feminine that you are afraid to unleash. And because of this, because of her feral quality, she can be very used for catharsis. Catharsis is a really important metaphysical thing that we experience, and that is what is the basis of the emotion of catharsis or of release. So throughout our lives, we accrue miasma, we accrue rot, we accrue pollution, we get spiritually dirty, right? We go against the gods and we get dirty. And the way to become undirty, to become clean, is to experience catharsis, release, to explode. And Hekate allows us to explode. When you work with Hekate, we're talking about ritual stasis. We're talking about singing, screaming, running, being out in the wilderness, right? Because remember, one of the key archetypes of Hekate is the outsider, the fringe. And so sacred spaces to her are on the fringes. And that also means that Hekate is the ruler of people who are on the fringes of society, the outsider, the weirdo. That is the Hekatean archetype. And that's the real reason why she is tied to the witch. So the witch has always been a loaded term. That has always been sort of a fighting word to call someone, right? Witch carries a connotation with it. A witch is something transgressive. And what is Hekate but not transgression? And Hekate sort of challenges us to see magic within the transgressive, to not just see sacred things as sacred, but to see the sacred within the profane. Because one of the key mysteries of Western esotericism is that there is no separation. Everything is connected. There is no thing that is not connected to other things. And so Hekate actually asks us to explore that. To explore, like, maybe in this barren place, this dirty place, this far out place, there is divinity. And one really powerful meditation you can do with Hekate is to go to a ditch or, somewhere nasty or somewhere ugly and try to find the divinity within it. Now, another thing that is sacred to Hekate is the crossroads. So I mean, literally like the crossroads. Of course, when we speak about our lives and in poetic terms, we understand that the crossroads are any point where we're, deciding where to go, where we need to make a decision, where we're on the threshold between things. But it's also a place. There are literal crossroads. And Hekate rules both of these things. Hekate rules that emotional crossroads, like when we're at a turning point. And for that reason, Hekate is very much, related to beginnings and endings. Once again, I mentioned she's sacred to that new moon and that dark moon. What happens on the new moon and the dark moon? It goes from death to life. It crosses a threshold. And while she is a bit more associated with that dark moon, she's still associated with the new moon. And actually, the sacred feast to Hekate happens every month. It's called Depnon or Diapnon. I'm really bad at speaking Greek. I'm so sorry. And that happens every single new moon. So every new moon, there is a sacred holiday to Hekate where you can commune with her and honor her. And that is when? On the crossroads of the month, when death becomes birth. And so any sort of crossroads place is a place to connect to Hekate. So I mean that, if you want to involve yourself with the Hekatean mysteries, going to a literal crossroads is helpful, especially if it's a three-way crossroads, because Hekate is a triune goddess. She is a triple goddess. When she's depicted in classical art, she's often depicted with three faces, meaning that the number 3 is very sacred to her. And so if you can find a three-way crossroads, you have found the most sacred place to Hekate. So I want to talk about that 3 number. So in numerology, what planet is associated with the number 3? Let me give you a secret. It's not the moon. So Hekate, we call her a moon goddess, but the number 3 is the number of Saturn. Saturn is the furthest out planet. Saturn is the ruler of death, discipline, restrictor, destruction. He is the great restrictor, the great disciplinarian of the sky, the ruler of the signs Capricorn and Aquarius. And Saturn is the greater malefic. Saturn is a powerful force, and Saturn is, of course, associated with the Greco-Roman god of Chronos Saturnus. So, I mentioned early in this video, Hekate is a Titan. Hekate is not an Olympian. You know who else is a Titan? Ding, ding, ding. For my mythology understanders, that would be Chronos or Saturnus or Saturn, whatever you want to call him. So there is a connection between Hekate and Saturn. Now, I'm not saying they are the same entity, but I am saying they do have some overlaps. As well, Kabbalistically, we understand that the spear of Saturn, Binah, is a feminine spear. So technically, Saturn is kind of the divine feminine, actually, because Saturn restricts just like the divine feminine restricts, and Saturn is on the pillar of severity, just like the divine feminine, and Binah is a feminine spear. And so Hekate really can help you understand the mysteries of Binah. So Binah on the Kabbalistic tree of life is, of course, course, the spear right on the other side of the abyss or dot. So Binah is what happens right after you cross the abyss, meaning that any sort of interaction with Binah can help you approach the abyss and cross the abyss. And so Hekate can help you do abyssal work. For this reason, Hekate also can help you do a lot of shadow work and help you understand your own shadow. So if you have shadow work you need to do, you have things you're repressing, things you need to explore, Hekate can be a great path because of that Binah, and Binah is Hebrew for understanding type connection. So if you want to look into yourself, you want to see what you're repressing, you want to explore, your deep self, you really can do that through Hekate. Also, in terms of astrological signs, I do think Aquarius, that specific Saturn archetype in that sign, very much overlaps with the Hekate archetype. I think exploring Aquarius really will help you explore Hekate, and so consider those sort of archetypes in conjunction. Now, that is not a traditional opinion. That is my opinion. But I think there's a bit of truth to it, so I really, ask you to ponder it. Now, in terms of developing a relationship with Hekate, there's a lot of different sources you can pull from. There's a lot of resources, a lot of grimoires written for Hekate. Hekate is a very popular goddess, and historically she has been too. So I would say if you want to learn about Hekatean magic, the first place you want to look is the PGM or the Greek Mountain Papyri. This is a ancient grimoire that we have left from antiquity. It has literal rituals people were doing in the ancient world, and it is deeply magical, right? There's a lot of invocations, evocations, really crazy stuff. You could literally just work with the PGM and that be your whole magical practice, and you could reach a stasis. It's really incredible. So look at the PGM. That's a really great starting point. There's a lot of amazing invocations and workings with her. I love the PGM invocations and I use them a lot. As well, one thing you'll notice when you look at the PGM, and this is really interesting, is that a lot of Hekate rituals are done in tandem with Helios. So Helios is the Greek and Roman god of the sun, the bringer of the chariot, and Hekate and Helios are invoked together, which what that means is that they're forming a polarity. So Hekate is of course death and the sun is life. And that's really interesting because it adds to this Hekate-Saturn connection, because Saturn and the sun are sort of, in a sense, kind of inverses of each other, right? Saturn and sun, when you're looking at a lot of religions, are sort of doing a dance together. Like in Christianity, of course, Saturn is the father and Jesus is the son, and obviously there's an interplay there. So it's very interesting. Hekate and Helios are very much linked and used as a polarity that is formed within a lot of these rituals. So if you want to work with Hekate, you might also want to work with Helios. This can create some really good balance and, help you understand these more ancient rituals. But you don't just have to look at the PGM. I mean, you could just use, hymns from antiquity too. You could just straight up theurgy with Hekate. You could have a mystic devotion. You could avoid magic entirely and just sort of stick to mysticism. There's also a lot of contemporary work written about Hekate. The most popular and good, in my opinion, contemporary work to Hekate is called the Hekatean. Now, this book is pretty hard to get a copy of. So if you can't get it, there's so many other options. There's a lot of even from mainstream occult publishers, books on Hekate. There's so many books on Hekate out there. There's so many you can explore. I really recommend reading those and exploring them because, modern esoteric techniques with Hekate are really good. There's a lot of great information out there. And as well, learning about the sort of practices she's associated with will also help you understand Hekate, like learning about ancestor work and working with the dead, learning about, astral projection, remote viewing, learning about veneficium, learning about these poison plants, learning about the moon phases. All of that will help you have a better understanding of Hekate. I would recommend for your first interaction with Hekate to simply, use that labyrinth symbol. That's the one that I use on my altar to represent Hekate. I like it because it's a really good focus point. I can use it like a mandala and I can gaze on it and meditate upon it. But just use that symbol. You also could use a statue. You could use what you want. But I like the labyrinth image. And then gaze at it, right? Meditate on it. And meditate on it for long enough. And obviously leave an offering while you do this. And you'll develop that immediate connection. And then from there, you can do the more complicated rituals. I, of course, am so partial to the PGM. But there's many contemporary ones. And you also could write your own ritual. Now, I wouldn't recommend the first ritual you do with a spirit to be one that you've originally written, but it can be done, right? Aleister Crowley said that sometimes, our sort of prayers that we come up with from our heart can be just as powerful as a proper ritual. So be, not afraid to pray from your own heart. Now, in terms of timing, I do recommend your first interaction with Hekate to be on Depnon, on our sacred holiday, on the new moon or the dark moon. And one really good course of frequency is to work with her every new moon. So every new moon, this is what I do, devote it to Hekate. As well, she is associated with sleep and dreams, so you can do some dream work with Hekate and use plants like the Artemisias, like mugwort, to connect with her deeper. Now, also in terms of days of the week, she is associated with Monday, Moon Day, and Saturn Day. So those are 2 days you could work with her. And of course, you can use planetary hours to get even more specific. You can pray to her, you can leave her offerings. There's, very many traditional offerings like persimmons, that would be a traditional offering, onions, you know, poison plants. Those are kind of her traditional offerings, but you can give your own offerings. You know, you can give wine, you can give eggs, you can give honey, you can give, you know, a cinnamon roll you baked. You can give whatever, and you can honor her. And also remember, with Hekate, devotional acts are also valuable, like screaming, singing, and don't be afraid to get a little bit feral. If you're still afraid of getting a bit feral and you're still restrained, you haven't fully connected with Hekate, because Hekate is a goddess of transgression, of boundaries, of crossing over. She's really, really powerful, and this should give you kind of a good starting point for understanding Hekate and diving into the Hekatean mysteries. Now, I have a big announcement. I'm doing another Greek trip with Trova Trip to Egypt. This one's a spiritual pilgrimage. We're going to go to Cairo, we're going to go to Aswan, we're going to go to Luxor, and sign-up links will be below. And I'm also going to, you know, we're going to see the pyramids, we're going to go sailing on the Nile, and I'm also going to give live classes, group meditations, group pathworking, so you can do ritual with me in a sacred land. So sign up below. I also am a professional tarot reader and astrologer. You can book a reading with me below, and you also can support this channel. So this channel is supported through Patreon. If you join the Patreon, you get a ritual guide every month. That's over 20 pages of seasonally and astrologically appropriate rituals that I have written. You also will get early access to all these videos and a bonus video every month. I also am on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter/X/ whatever we're calling that, Substack, and I think that's most places. I'm really everywhere. And I also host the podcast Pagan Perspectives by Georgina Rose. You can listen on this YouTube channel, or you can go to Spotify to listen. I hope you have an amazing day, afternoon, mid-morning, mid-evening, whatever time it is, wherever you are. I have been Georgina Rose, and if you're still listening, like, comment, subscribe, and if you subscribe for 93 days, you will meet your holy guardian angel, and you'll never need to approach Hekate again. All right, have an amazing day. Bye!